if you, oh, great, it's recording, is that everybody can use this. And can you go to the next slide, please? That was the handbook that they used to come up with this presentation. So I wanted to get into it because I don't like blathering on without understanding who people are. So I'd like to have some introductions. So if you could, Dan, put the Zoom whiteboard back up. I'd like you to put your name and one word to describe how you're feeling about starting this workshop. Yeah, if you could start a new one, that would be great. I'll give you a minute to do that. You can use the text box too. You don't have to do my my method of doing it.
Excited. We have an interested.
Mm-hmm. Get excited. Eager.
Interested.
Normally I'm also hosting when I run things, so I apologize. Looks like the whiteboard isn't working for everybody. Okay. I'll let people wrap up what they're saying. Okay.
Go on, go on, go on. Go on, go on.
Yes, if the whiteboard isn't working for you, feel free to use the chat box. That is perfectly acceptable. All right, well, let's move on. It looks like we have interested, excited, eager. I think somebody was going to write happy. So it sounds like there's a little bit of enthusiasm in the room. Perhaps everyone's charged up from the keynote speakers today. All right, let's move on to the next slide, please. All right.
I don't know.
All right. So you can go to the next slide. So real talk. So this is a mnemonic device that the presenters have developed to help us remember how to have these conversations that may be difficult at sometimes. Next slide. The first activity we're going to do, I mentioned we're going to have several opportunities for us to be engaging with one another, is exercise 1. Polls show that people are worried about climate change all around the world, but they also show that many people don't talk about climate change much. This informal silent agreement not to talk about a topic that can feel frightening, distant, or uncomfortable is known as climate silence. This is changing, however, as people get more concerned about climate change, and it also varies a lot amongst different audiences. So even if you talk about climate change a lot in your daily life, others may not. So let's take some time. Dan, could you split people up into groups? What I'd like you to talk about, you're going to be split up with a partner, and talk to your partner about, do you ever talk about climate change? And when do you not talk about climate change? And who or why not? And what are some reasons people don't talk about climate change? So I'm going to put that in the chat box, and you are going to have, I think, 4 minutes to talk with your partner in total, and answer those questions. And then if you want to take notes, we'll come back as a group and talk it out. So
I'm going to try to get people into groups of 2, but some of you might have 3 in your room. So
okay.
make the best of your conversation.
Yes. And I will put those prompts in the chat for you so that you have access to them. Okay.
Amber, if you could let me know when you want to end the rooms. That would be
Yes,
great.
I set a timer for 4 minutes.
Okay.
So I will let you know I'll let you know at 3:30 or when there's 30 seconds, because it usually lets people have a minute when they're coming back. And I didn't go into a breakout room because I figured that would be too stressful for me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, I don't want to go in one.
Too many
That's
things
a
to do
little
at
too much.
once.
Yeah, it's tough to do when there's you don't have the screen. Usually I host so many meetings, but it's more challenging this way. Hopefully they all had it in there. I'm going to put it in the chat one more time just in case that sometimes the chat doesn't work when they break out or something.
Yeah.
Okay. So when people come back, we'll keep this slide up for a little bit and then we'll process. We'll have about 4 minutes for people to share some of their thoughts, and then we'll get into the next slide.
Okay.
Okay. Let them back in, please.
All righty.
All right.
I left early. I'm sad. I saw the 59 seconds pop up and then I clicked and I left and I didn't
Oh,
leave
no.
yet.
I've done that too, Peggy.
I'm
I was
sad.
trying to give, people their warning.
Probably can't send me back though. Not enough time. Have to catch up with them later.
Mhm.
More breakout rooms to come.
Yes. Who knows who you'll be assigned to chat with.
So yeah, I already had my first like uncomfortable. Had to leave a room earlier and go to a different one. It was bad.
Mhm. All right. All right. So while people are coming back in, I'd like to offer all of you an opportunity to, if you have enough bandwidth, you can share your video and also just process this a little bit. I'm going to set another timer. And do people want to share any of their thoughts or things that came up in their conversations with friends? You can unmute yourself and share. What are some reasons people don't talk about climate change?
I don't know, Aaron, do you want to? we kind of got off. 4 minutes wasn't enough, and that's pretty bad because I'm supposed to be the moderator. So anyway, we talked real briefly about how it's a challenge. Aaron said it's a challenge as an educator for healthy lakes. Is that what the program you're on, Aaron?
Well, I help coordinate Clean Boats, Clean
Or
Waters,
clean boats,
but
clean waters. Okay.
but in general, I find it difficult because it's not a topic that I've felt really comfortable talking about for a long time, because I find that there are even simply the word climate change, or if I use the wrong term, that seems to come across to people in a way that upsets them, or some people it won't. But I, as an educator, always want folks to feel like I'm simply sharing information with them and they can take that back how they and receive that how they'd like, but I don't ever want to come across as biased or that I'm pushing something at a certain angle. And so I hesitate and find myself like, well, we'll just try to get around that. You know, even in our newsletter that we publish with Extension Lakes, it's difficult to use certain terms without coming across as biased. So that's just a challenge I have.
Mhm.
And I had just related it to being as serving on Wisconsin Lakes Board. I obviously come in contact with a lot of people and being active on my lake. And people will say, you know, why don't I have birds in my yard? Or, you know, I just had a gentleman the other day who had a question, and sometimes that's a good segue into just generally a discussion like, well, gee, you know, why are there geese still here over the winter on your lawn and they're not migrating? So I think sometimes, again, bringing it to more of a local level, you know, why are not we seeing birds or these types of things that are of interest to people? I think that's one way to talk about it that I try to do.
We had a group of 3 people in ours. Whitney and Susan were also with me in a group. And one of the topics we discussed was taking a moment and writing your story. Everybody has a story. And I told them my story. I'm with Citizens Climate Lobby, and so is Susan. And I think Whitney might have heard of it before. But all of us are involved to some degree, either with natural resources or with climate change in general. And if you do take a moment to think about what your story is, how has climate change affected you? It really does help if you just write it down once, take a few minutes, and it doesn't have to be real long, a couple paragraphs, you might be done. In my case, it was how fishing had changed where I live. I live on a lake and it's been changing over 25 years. And it's changed from a lot of walleyes and cool water fish to more channel catfish and bullheads, which are warm water fish. And, that's just my story. I wondered what everybody else's story is. But if you do that, and the only reason for writing it down is to get your thoughts together a little better. You might not want to write it down, but if you write it down, it'll be in your head a little bit more firmly than if you don't write it down. That's one thing we talked about.
Thank you, Ned. I'm gonna move us along as we have a lot to cover today. If you have any further comments, you can add them in the chat. Next slide, please. In the presentation. All right. So people around the world are worried about climate change. You can see in this graphic, how worried are you about climate change? Granted, this was done in 2015, but it has a smattering of different countries, and it shows whether they are extremely worried, very worried, somewhat worried, all the way to not at all worried. And there is, I would say, quite a bit of concern about climate change across the world. Next slide, please. And then the climate science. So there's a social agreement not to talk about climate change. So I can't remember who said it, but it's been challenging to know how or when you can use the term climate change. So how often, if at all, do you discuss issues related? And you can see in this graphic how that breakdown looks from, just take a moment for you all to look at that. Next slide. So why does challenging the climate science matter? Again, those day-to-day conversations that some of you were mentioning are part of social change. Challenging climate science matters because talking more openly feeds momentum for change. We've seen that before with previous social movements around racism, sexism, etc. Democratic governments are unlikely to take significant action without public support. So again, things that we know. Next slide, please. So reasons people find it difficult. What challenges do you have in talking about climate change? It was a survey. And again, you can see in here that this survey involved 550 people from 56 countries around the world. People gave the #1 reason as the most important reason, which is, excuse me, I'm sorry, as the most important reason, and #6 is the least important reason for not feeling confident about climate change. So 1 being, I don't know what to do about it. 2, people don't think it's relevant. 3, people don't like talking about scary things. 4, people don't know what to do about it. And people don't like feeling guilty about climate change. So I don't think other people care. So around the world, people share the same reasons for not feeling confident about talking about climate change. Okay, so after seeing some of those charts and graphs, we are going to go into another exercise. So Dan, if you flip to the next screen, the next slide. Okay, here you go. So you're gonna be split up into pairs or possibly threes again, and you are going to take on different roles. So one of you could choose to be your dad, a conservative politician, a soldier, a cool teenager, whatever. So you get to choose what role you're going to play, and we are going to have a conversation with each other. Next slide, please. So you're going to talk with different audiences. So we're going to put you in breakout rooms again. This time you'll have some opportunity to talk again. And I'm going to put these prompts in the chat box again. And the questions are, where would this person go on a holiday? Or what are their 3 core values? And what do you have in common with this person? So think about those things, and we will put you in a group for, I believe this one will be 4 minutes again. So I will put those questions in there and we'll break out into our rooms. So Dan, please. This is a very active Zoom host role today. All right. There we go. I'll put the time. Hey, Dan, could you let the folks in again? Give them their warning.
Yeah, sorry if I'm a little slow on the gun sometimes here. I'm working with two screens and sometimes they don't cooperate very. It's like I try to maximize something and it comes up in the screen and I can't see it because something else is in its way. And
Yeah, it's the online world is challenging. I haven't done a lot of, as you may surmise, online education. It's always been in person, so it's a different beast.
indeed.
Hello, welcome back.
4 minutes isn't long enough.
It isn't. I know. I really struggled with this. People always want to, have those one-on-one conversations. They're very helpful. So going off of that, I'd invite all of you to share some of your thoughts after having taken on a different persona, perhaps. What do you have in common with that person? Where would this person go on a holiday? Any of those prompts anyone would like to share?
I found it challenging that while Jeannie and I were talking, like we could get to our common ground and we could, talk about something that's kind of interesting, but then how do you get to that point from where, because we took on the role that she was a corporate elite person that was skiing and flying on their jet every weekend to go skiing. And I was talking about, me skiing and how we wanted to go a long time. And we couldn't because the season was really short, because of the melting snow. But then where do you go from there? That was, I think, the biggest challenge that at least I found, being the one trying to talk to it. So we have that common ground, but then the jump from there, or is that not the point?
We came up with food being a common ground.
Yeah.
Yes, everyone has to eat.
Or grow food.
Or grow food. It has to come from somewhere. Any other thoughts? What you might have in common with that person? What are their core values that you can relate to?
I think in the plenary session that just happened, one thing that I took away from that and is applicable to this is oftentimes, and we didn't end up getting to role play because we didn't have the questions in front of us. So we kind of just pivoted, but just sharing the story and, just relating it back to if I role play and I'm my person and myself and my family, I come from an agricultural family and we're farmers. And so talking about our story and why we make choices and how we're growing and changing, and we ultimately arrive at why we're making choices we are because of climate change. And so you don't start off on that foot. You can maybe find common ground because farming is something relatable. People get it. They are interested in it. You say you grow vegetables. Oh, that's interesting because they eat, right? So you find that, and then you arrive at climate change, and there's a more general understanding, I think, of why we're making different choices. Like our family is participating in a utility scale solar project. So people question, well, you're farmers. Why are you doing that? Why would you give up your land? And that conversation really changes and grows as you talk.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts?
Amber, I think the struggle might be in getting to the point, the exercise asked us to think about common core values. But I think the struggle might be in not knowing, in the folks that you interact with every day, not knowing what their core values are. And so it's not as easy as sitting down in a group of 3 here and sort of self-identifying what that person's core values would be, because I used to think that I would have more core values in common with the people that I grew up with. But when I go back, whether it's family or friends, the people that I went to high school with, I've had different life experiences in the last 20 years, 25 years than they have. And it's amazing to me how we all came from the same place, but we ended up someplace very different. So that idea of finding those core values in itself is really hard without asking probing questions. How do you know what you could only, otherwise you are sort of guessing or making an assumption of someone, what their core values would be from what you maybe knew about them 20 years ago. So that's difficult for me to even get to the point of knowing how we might find that common ground.
That makes sense. We have 30 seconds left. Does anyone else want to share on this topic?
Hi, everyone. This is Tim. I found in talking about climate, one of the big things is this concept of change, and things are in the future not going to be what they were in the past. And I think people are sad about that. And I think that's a conversation, that even with somebody who's sort of older and set in their ways, perhaps, or has a different political bent, it's kind of this idea that, there are things we can do to help restore, bring back, resist, be resilient, sort of preserve what is good that we all love, and that there's actions to help preserve that for longer, as long as possible. Those are the kinds of things. I think that's places sometimes you can find some common ground with people, regardless of their, worldviews.
Good point. Thank you. Well, Dan, I'll move us along. Do you mind sharing the presentation again? Okay, thank you. All right, so part of this, as I sent you off to the wolves, or so to speak, to each other, and some of the common grounds that we use when we have these conversations are the nonviolent communication, the empathetically receiving and observing feelings and needs of the other, avoiding fear, guilt, shame, obligation, because they compromise the connection. And as I think Peggy was alluding to, trying to figure out what those values are that you share and what you both care about. Just a personal reflection, I have these challenges with my family and I am working through them. I know that I've not always been the best at this. Next slide, please. And then also coming in with an open mind, to learn from from whomever you're talking to in life, to see that conversation as a way to learn about how others think about climate change, about the topic itself, and about how to have a good conversation, period. I like to do this, especially with my family. I have had a running experiment with them since I was young about trying different things with them and different ways of approaching them and seeing what kind of reactions I get. It has had various helpfulness throughout the years. Some things are effective and some things are not effective at all. Next slide, please. All right, so we're starting to build up this mnemonic device, right? So we have the R, respect that conversational partner, whoever that may be, and find that common ground, however hard that is. And then the L, learning from that conversational partner. Maybe they will have the capacity to teach you something new, and then you'll be able to find more common ground with them. All right, next slide. All right. Another thing that I think is really helpful is to actually enjoy your conversation with people, because that just is simply more authentic. It's much more fun, and you can, I think, get more truth out of people when you are yourself, relaxed and authentic. So use the right moment. I have definitely chosen the wrong moment before to bring up these conversations, and I try not to do that anymore. Also use positive body language. Use the phrase, "Can we talk about this again?" Trying to end on a positive note. And also try not to judge your conversation too harshly. Treating each one as a little experiment rather than a major test. So I'll share one thing. So I used to work at the state energy office, and it's been years. I've been working on climate change for a long time too, and decades into working on it, my sister finally asked me, "So I heard about acid rain." And she actually came to me to get information, which I was like, whoa, very interesting. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so E, enjoy yourself. Have some fun with it. Otherwise, we'll get too bogged down in the reality of climate change. All right, next slide. All right, so we have been at it for about 40 minutes. I'll give you 5 minutes for a bio break or whatever break you want to take. And then we'll reconvene. We'll put this, we'll keep the Zoom meeting going, and I'll just turn my video off and I'll still be here. So if you have any other questions while other people are taking a break, I'll be here. And I've started the timer.
For those just coming in the room, we are on a small break, but presentation will continue, conversation will continue in just a few minutes.
Yes, 1 minute and change. Dan, do you mind putting the next slide up so it's ready for people? Thank you. All right. My 5-minute buzzer has gone. So thank you all for coming back. I hope you feel a little refreshed after the break. I know that having a virtual online conference can be pretty taxing for everybody involved, having so many online calls. So thank you for coming back. And the next part, I think you all are going to very much enjoy. Our third exercise is telling your own story. And some of you have talked about already how you are aware of how important this is. What we're going to do is we're going to break out into groups of 2 to 3 again, and we will have conversations about when did you start caring about climate change? Was there a particular moment that you can remember? What action are you taking on climate change now? And how do you feel about that? So you choose who's going to go first, person A and then person B, and then person A shouldn't do anything except ask the questions. The only exception to this rule is if person B gets really stuck. Then person A could prompt them with some kind of open question like, was that difficult or how did that go? Just to help them along. Person A should then spend 30 seconds feeding back to person B what it was like listening to the story and anything that really struck them as to what person B said. So then the pair will swap the roles so that person B is the asker and person A is the teller. And then again, after that opportunity to talk and listen, you spend 30 seconds or so reflecting on that experience together. So you both have an opportunity to listen and to also tell your story. So I was gonna do 4 minutes each, but I think I'll do 5 minutes each just based on how I think important it is for people to be able to chat a little bit.
Amber,
So,
can you
yes,
quickly put some of this in the chat? So
I
if we
will.
forget?
Yes, I will
Thanks.
definitely do that. Great observation, Ned. Any other questions before we kick you off into those breakout rooms to have these conversations? Okay. All right, I will put them in. And Dan, if you wouldn't mind putting people into their groups, that would be great. Again, it's 10 minutes total. So feel free to take notes about your partner. And we'll share afterwards. Hi, Dan. Will you bring them back? We have about 24 seconds left, so.
All righty.
Thank you.
I accidentally left my group too early, hit the wrong button.
I know I struggle because, oh man, I'm like, I want to give people warning so they can wrap up, but you're not the first person already today.
I've done that too, Whitney. Click on the wrong,
Yeah.
that little pop-up comes up and you just click it to get rid of it. Ooh,
Yeah.
that's not what I wanted to click on.
Whoops.
So Amber, did you say you went through like a training for this?
No, they asked me to do this on Thursday. And yeah, and I didn't have time to create my own presentation, so I modified one.
Nice. Well, that's you're doing very good for having a less than a week notice.
Thank you. It's not my preferred mode of operating, but we do what we do, you know? All right. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you all had some nice conversations. I wanted to open up the discussion with thinking about two things. One is, how did it feel when you were the person that was telling the story?
I think a lot of it has to do with whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. If you're an extrovert, which I am, I could hardly wait. It's my turn to talk. Give me half a second and I'll talk, you know. If you're an introvert, yeah, you don't really want to do this very much, but you got to do it.
Any other reflections on being the teller, the storyteller? Oh, Debbie, I think you're muted.
I think knowing something about the topic allows me to want to share that idea. Whereas 4 months ago, I knew so little about this topic, I would be the one to not say anything because I had nothing to say I didn't know.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else want to share what it was like being the teller of the story, your own story? I am also an extrovert, so I have no problem with that either. I'm trying to tone it down.
Well, I thought in our group, Susan and Peggy and I all had interesting stories to share, and we were all willing, you know, after having a couple minutes to think about our story, very willing to tell that story. And all of us, or the three of us, all agreed that we want to do more than what we're doing. And I think that's why we're here.
Sounds very likely. Thank you. Yeah. If I may switch it to opening up the reflections to what did it feel like when you were the person deeply listening to another person's story?
That was fun, just in part because I never get to talk to anyone different anymore. You know, it's just nice to have opportunities to talk to different people. But it was fun hearing from Kim and just listening to a couple little parallels in our life, and then how she grew from one thing she was doing to another, and now she's doing really cool work, and it's all tied to climate, and that's just listening to that growth is cool.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to share?
Just ditto to what Jeannie said in that it's, I think for me, easier to listen and more enjoyable to listen than to tell my own story. But especially because we had things that came up that were common between us, Girl Scouts as young girls. And so it was just really enjoyable listening to other people's story.
Okay. Well, if I may, I'll ask Dan to put up the next slide in the presentation. Keep moving along. So at this point, we'll talk about telling your story. So we're going to start filling in some more of those letters in that mnemonic and telling your story. If you're not a scientist, it's easy to think that you are not qualified to talk about the climate crisis. I can't remember who said that once they learned more, they felt more comfortable sharing about it. But research shows that humans aren't motivated by statistics. We are motivated by the stories. And your personal story is a powerful tool of communication, whoever you are talking to and however much technical information you know. It can bring the issue of climate change, which can often feel distant from day-to-day concerns, really close to home. If you go to the next slide, please. And another piece is the A, the asking questions. So rather than lecturing your conversational partner about your views, ask about what climate change means to them. Give them the space to reflect on their own experiences and views on the issues. I have definitely guilty of lecturing my family about these things, and it has never been effective. So give them space to reflect on their own story. Again, use some of these strategies of the deep listening and repeating some things back. Any questions about this? Okay. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so again, as we're filling out our mnemonic, we're moving closer along, respecting your partner that you're talking to, enjoying yourself, asking those questions, listen and show that you've heard, and tell your story, and then learning from your conversational partner. All right. Another exercise, how exciting. So we will be going into groups again, and I've already heard murmurings of what to do next. So now is your opportunity to talk to your friends about what you will be doing. So for this one, you will name one action that you know of that is being taken to address climate change that has inspired you. Maybe it's something from this conference. And then also name one action on climate change that you would like to take, but you haven't managed to do it yet. I can think of some for myself as well. Again, I will put the questions into the chat. I'll just see if anyone has any questions before we split up into groups and chat again. If it helps to take notes while you're listening to your partner, that is encouraged. All right, I think everybody's getting the hang of it. All right, Dan, want to put them in the groups? I'll put the chat up for the prompts. Oh, and this will be, I'm sorry, 4 minutes for this, and then we'll come back. Hey, Dan, can you give them their minute reminder?
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
I had no idea you had to come up with this at the last minute. Did they not have someone lined up and just created this session and took them that long to find you, or what?
I don't know. I just know I was asked on Thursday, and it did have somewhat of a script that I could reference. But yeah, it's I modified it today. So they have a lot of sessions going on.
Yeah, I'm doing a presentation with some of my colleagues on Wednesday, and we're doing some breakout rooms too. And we were just trying to figure out, well, how many people are really having the rooms? I don't know. Depends.
No, it reminds me of my days. So I used to be an environmental educator and a naturalist, and you don't know if nobody's going to come to your program or 100 people. You just don't know. And the online world is a little different,
right?
But similar in that regard. All right, looks like people are starting to come back. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some nice conversations again. I will invite you again to share some of your reflections from chatting with folks. You can unmute yourself.
I chatted with Kim, and I think it's really cool. She started a climate change book club, which I think that's really, really cool. I don't know what the titles are, but I'd like to join it. I think it sounds great. So, and then Kim also said she would like to contact her representatives more for the Citizens Climate Lobby, being able to reach out to her representatives more on climate change issues.
Great.
Hey, Kim, maybe you could throw a few titles in the chat.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. All right, will do.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo with the Ashland Land and Water Conservation Department up in Ashland. And I was in a breakout room with Whitney, and we ended up starting to talk about more challenges that we face with climate change with work. So we didn't actually do the assignment, but the biggest change or difference that I see happening with climate change in my community, I see solar panels everywhere now. And it's something that I haven't done myself on my own home, but I'm committed to doing it. And I've thought about it for about 10 years. And now that I see the peer pressure, my neighbors, people around me, it's like, okay, it's time to implement this.
Great. You didn't totally veer off the path then, if you got to that.
We actually didn't get to that. I just had to share that with her in the chat. That's what my comment would have been.
Well, Mary Jo, you might find that it makes sense economically. You don't have to be an environmentalist. You just save money. That's all there is to it. If you live in the house for the next 3 years or longer, according to the homework I did, you're going to come out ahead. If you're going to move in the next year or two, you probably aren't going to come out ahead.
No, and it's not just about economics for me. My whole career is natural resources and natural resource management, and so for me, it's also an ethical thing. Yeah, and part of it is, we're all busy, so I just need to create the time to do the research and find the consultant and make the effort to commit to it.
Anyone else want to share an action that they'd like to take? Or something that inspired you?
I just, I keep thinking of, the inspiration for me is coming from the young people that are so invested in it. And at 62, that's pretty much everybody. But, the stuff coming from the really young people, like the young lady we had this morning in a session who presented and from Madison, and then the more famous ones, but it's going on all over the place. And I think us in the older generations should be listening really carefully.
Thank you for sharing. We're about at time for that conversation. So Dan, will you share the presentation again? All right. So taking action. Action makes those conversations easier. In the research for the Talking Climate Handbook, Climate Outreach found that people who were taking some kind of action, even if it felt small, personal, and not in line with the extent of the problem, found it was much easier to start a climate change conversation. The idea of doing something makes the topic easier to address and the intimidating information about climate change easier to cope with. And action doesn't only matter in and of itself, but also because it influences others. So as our friend in Ashland County was mentioning, people make decisions about their behavior partly based on what others they respect and trust are doing. So talking about what you've done may move the person you were talking to closer to a position where they want to do something themselves. Next slide. And it also encourages that efficacy. So communications research shows that people need a sense of efficacy in order to take action. So a belief that they can personally do something and that the thing that they do will be effective. And in presenting your own actions, emphasize that they are actually doable and realistic. I can put solar panels on my roof and there's a great payback, ROIs in 3 years, etc. But also encourage your conversational partner to reflect on their own path and what makes sense for the person they are. So again, those conversations to find out what matters to them. And then the action, it makes you happier. Research shows that people taking action to reduce their emissions also tend to be happier. So who doesn't want to be happier during a pandemic? A growing body of work suggests it is possible to live better by consuming less. Next slide, please. And also the fun part, climate change can be dismal conversations, but you can acknowledge the grief, but avoid the despair. Sometimes the size of the problem can lead to a sense of overwhelm, and that's normal. So explicitly acknowledging that sense of paralysis and helplessness and speaking openly about it is helpful. And then pair those conversations about the impacts of climate change with the potential solutions. So that's really important to keep in mind that there are solutions, and keep those in mind when you talk with people about them. And then re-emphasize that link between the individual and the systemic change. Next slide, please. All right, so we're building up we're almost done. We're building up our mnemonic here. So we're telling our story, we're taking action, we're learning from people. Next slide, please. And we get to have another exercise. So we get to have a conversation about how you feel about having climate conversations now. And would you be willing to commit to having 5 climate conversations by a certain amount of time? Maybe it's by the time the governor's budget is passed. I don't know. What would you like? So in the Talking Climate research, more than 1 in 10 conversations have struggled because of a feeling of being overpowered by the size of the problem, experiencing a sense of individual powerlessness in the face of the need for systemic change. So something to keep in mind. We can do focus on some of the positive solutions instead. And again, I'm just going back to that grief bit. We're not going to talk about it too much here, but there are books. There's a book called Active Hope, how to face the mess we're in without going crazy. It's available in multiple languages in case some of you are bi or trilingual. Okay. And so making this commitment. Some of the participants in the Talking Climate research told us that the most useful part of it wasn't the advice we provided, but it was a sense of being part of a wider effort. So, which encouraged them to keep having those climate change conversations, which they might otherwise not have done. So again, going back to those slides earlier, a lot of people just aren't having those conversations. I think like most people, I don't know what the statistic is, so I won't say it. I'm sure somebody else has today, but not very many people actually have the conversations. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. They highlighted the community as the most important factor, encouraging them to keep that climate change conversations in the future. So we're going to have an open conversation now. Anyone have any thoughts that they'd like to share? How do you feel? We won't go into breakout rooms. We'll just talk now.
Well, I probably am not typical as usual. I love to make climate conversations, and I've been doing it for 8 years. So it's very empowering, and the most empowering thing that I felt of anything is to go to Washington, D.C. when there's no COVID, and that's going to be November of this year. We're going to have to do Zoom calls for March and June with Citizens Climate Lobby, but in November, we're going face to face and seeing our members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate. And you feel so empowered and happy about it. It's just amazing. It's like better than going to the Super Bowl, better than going. I was a delegate to the 2004 political convention of one of the political parties in Boston, and here's coming the TV camera right next to your shoulder. It's better than that. It's just fabulous because you get all these people that are so energized and that feel like they can make a difference. And they really can make a difference because we see every single member of the House and the Senate in order to, get rid of these feelings of hopelessness, these feelings of, I'm not big enough to do it. Well, you can't do it by yourself, but you can as part of a big group. And it doesn't have to be Citizens Climate Lobby. It can be National Wildlife Federation, Sierra Club, whatever you think is your group. It might be Nature Conservancy. I don't know, whatever you like. Just my advice as a biology professor for many years, I recently retired, was to my students, find something you're really excited about and then get involved in it, whatever it is. and you won't feel like you're powerless anymore.
Yeah, thanks, Ned. I know that there's a couple of people on this call too. I got involved in the Extension, Division of Extension Climate Change Leadership Team, and we're also doing things which helps me feel like I'm doing something and not as dire anymore. So, anyone else?
This is Stacy. I'm incredibly excited to be part of renewable energy in Wisconsin and how it's implemented, and just really excited to see how it's making Wisconsin sort of a great place to live and what we stand for, and we, making an impact on climate change and on human health. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of that. I'm learning a ton, and I think, we can all, for myself, as I start to learn, I'm implementing changes at home and trying to have good conversations. And this has been such a great opportunity to how to shape those conversations even better than what I've been able to do. But also, I think that it's worth noting that as people who care a lot about climate change, supporting a lot of these different types of projects and not proactive, but pushes to really make a big difference on a big scale in Wisconsin, and supporting some of those projects as they come forward as citizens and as true climate change warriors. So I guess that's what makes me excited. I'm excited to see how people react and all the benefits that we can bring to our communities with those projects.
Thank you. Anyone else have something they'd like to share? Are you willing to make a commitment to having a climate change conversation?
I definitely feel like after this exercise that I'm willing to have more conversations. And I think I think also too, just to drive home the point, and I think Ned hit it on the head too, where sometimes you feel that the issue is so overwhelming that you don't do anything because you don't think it makes a difference. But if you don't think small things make a difference, what did my dad say? You heat a dark room with a mosquito, and that'll tell you that small things have big effects. So I think making people feel like even small things have effects, the total. So I'm definitely going to have more conversations with people.
I think it's not necessarily that I want to have X number by a certain date or anything like that. I think I'm talking about it more, and that I just need to pay attention more to when I'm doing it and who I'm talking to. I know I talk a lot with the people who think like me. These days I don't see many people other than those people, and it's always on Zoom, but still, I think just a general awareness would be helpful of what we're already saying. And then you have your baseline, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to cut us short, but it is 3 o'clock. So I will move Dan on to the next slide. Thank you for all of your thoughts. I do like ending on time if possible. So I just wanted to round out this little acronym that we have for Real Talk: respect your conversational partner, have fun, enjoy yourself, ask lots of questions. I love asking people's questions because you find out so many things. And listen, tell your story, do stuff, learn from that person you're talking to, and keep going and stay connected. So I would invite you to share information with others on this call. If you want to stay on a little bit longer, you're welcome to share contact information. Maybe you want to expand that book club membership or whatnot. Next slide, please. And if you have any feedback you'd like to share, please feel free to, you can either email me or you could put it in the chat and I will listen to it, or read it, I should say. Feedback is always appreciated. I haven't done a lot of these online workshops myself, so I know I have things to work upon. Next slide, please. Thank you for joining and sticking it out and conversing with your new friends. Next slide. And here's my plug. If you're part of Extension, you can join the climate leadership team. We do stuff and it makes us feel better. And that's my contact information at the bottom. And that is all I have. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, Dan, for being the Zoom host. And thank you, Kristen, for helping facilitate. And thank you all for joining and being open with your conversation and having an open mind, and for wanting to engage in more climate conversations. It's very important. So thank you. I'm going to mute myself. I'll leave it on in case people want to have any feedback, either share it privately. I'll put my